Looking for a fresh way to connect with God daily? Join me and hundreds of thousands of others who are spending time with the Lord each morning with the help of First 15. First 15 is a daily devotional created to equip believers of all backgrounds to connect with God in the first 15 minutes of their day. When you sign up, you'll receive a devotional in your inbox every morning that leads you through scripture, reflection, a time of guided prayer, and even worship. Signing up is always free and incredibly easy. Just go to first15.org/sign up to get your First 15 devotional and start connecting with God in a fresh way tomorrow morning. That's first15.org/sign up. We'll see you tomorrow.
Did you know that Organifi makes products for kids? They just launched their brand new kids product called Organifi Protect. This is a delicious wild berry punch that tastes just like Kool-Aid you used to have as a kid, but without the sugar. This delicious berry punch is crafted with the purest organic ingredients, including a potent combination to bolster your child's immune defenses. It's especially formulated for kids with no artificial ingredients and gentle enough for them to drink every day. If you already love Organifi, you can add Organifi Kids Protect into your regimen, or if you're new to Organifi, check out their line of organic superfood blends that offer plant-based nutrition and high-quality ingredients, helping you move from a depleted to nourished state. Head over to www.organifi.com/bestofyou and use code bestofyou for 20% off your entire order. That's www.organifi.com/bestofyou. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Allison, and I'm so glad you're here to discover what brings out the best of you. This podcast is all about breaking free from painful patterns, mending the past, and discovering our true selves in God. I can't wait to get started as we learn together how to become the best version of who we are with God's help. Hey everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Best of You podcast. I am thrilled that you're here for this series where I'm getting to talk to just some amazing therapists and mental health experts and thought leaders at the intersection of faith and mental health. This is so fun for me. I love this intersection. You all know that. I talk about it every single week, and it's really a treat for me this summer to get to bring to you the benefit of so many others out there who are just providing some great resources in this integrated space. Before we dive in, remember, if you have questions about a specific area of therapy or about a specific issue or a specific diagnosis or a specific approach to therapy, please leave us your questions. Or if you have any questions based on these conversations we're having with different experts throughout this series, please leave us your questions. You can do that on Instagram or Facebook. Just leave me a comment on any post. It's at Dr. Allison Cook. We'll also link to the Best of You podcast question doc in the show notes, so you can leave your questions there, or you can email us. It's info@drallisoncook.com. We are always looking for feedback from you about what you want us to address, what questions you have, and how we can help you on this healing journey. Today's guest is Campbell. She's an award-winning licensed trauma therapist, a best-selling author, and she's also got a really helpful and insightful Instagram account where she shares wisdom from her years of work as a therapist. Kobe's first book is called Why Am I Like This? How to Break Cycles, Heal from Trauma, and Restore Your Faith. As you'll hear today, she brings such a genuineness, a kindness, and a wisdom to everything she does. She's got just some really helpful insights into trauma and into how she helps her clients heal from trauma. She's so real about her own journey, her own experiences, and how they inform her work as a therapist. And I'm just thrilled to bring you my conversation with Campbell. Kobe, I am so thrilled to have you here with us today. I got my hands on a copy of Why Am I Like This? It's a great book. Thank you for coming on to talk with us today. We're in a series talking to different therapists on therapy. And I really was so intrigued by how you opened the book with your own story. You talk about how your own pain and your own trauma, and I want to get into a little bit for the listener, almost got the best of you. I mean, a pretty dark moment in your life. I was just highlighting this part because I was so grateful for just the way that you phrased some of these things. You said, my head knew the truth of God's love for me, but my heart had forgotten its touch. I just thought that was so beautifully stated. And then you talked about how it's not that you hadn't been trying. You say, I would change for a few months or weeks at a time, but I'd find my way back to the old patterns that made the truth of God's love feel like a dream I was chasing rather than a reality I was living in. So tell us a little bit, put the listener a little bit back in that pretty dark moment where things kind of came to a head where you had a faith background. And yet just the pain of your life and your experiences and the stories and the trauma had just caught right up to you. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I wrestled with whether I wanted to start the book that way because I felt like it was too vulnerable, too intense. Like I just hadn't read many books, like therapy books that started that way. And, I think for me, what I realized I clicked with the clients and really felt a deep connection to and a deep sense of service to clients whose stories mirrored mine. And I think that one thing I found in common is we all kind of felt like we're asking the same questions, but we're not allowed to say them out loud. And so I wanted to start my book by saying the things out loud that a lot of people didn't feel like they had permission to say out loud. That like, I love God and I'm still depressed. I love God and I still feel anxiety. I'm going to Bible study. I'm reading my Bible. I'm praying. I'm seeking the Lord. I know God's love is real and present, but I just am struggling to experience it right now. And I think that there's some people who find themselves wondering, like, does God really care about me? Does my life really matter? And I know I had reached that point because it felt like all the answers people were giving me were answers that just made me feel like I just wasn't good enough. Well, if you just worked harder, if you did more, if you were more diligent. And so I started off by sharing my own story because I wanted the readers to know I'm in this with you. And I think sometimes when there's like, when you're talking to a therapist, people, especially when people have no concept of what therapy is, you can feel so nervous and so like, this is an expert who's never gone through anything. And like, how do I convey my pain in a way that, is honest, but doesn't make me seem like, huge figure quotations, not in the clinical way, but make me feel crazy. Like I've had clients say that before. And I think I was like, this book, I pray, reaches the people who want to go to therapy, but are really skeptical. And if they're skeptical, they need to know that I'm a person too. And that I was first in the same seat as them before I was in the seat of a therapist.
That's exactly right. We're fellow pilgrims in this journey as therapists. We have our own pain that we bring to the table. I loved it. I thought it's a powerful story. I can imagine it was very vulnerable to share. And I think as therapists, we're sort of trained in a way not to bring forth our own stories. So that adds another layer for us of dissonance sometimes about sharing from behind the scenes. And so I really appreciated that you did that. It's really powerful. One of the things you talked about was what it was like growing up as a twin. I thought this was so interesting, Kobe, and I wanted to touch on it because I think siblings, we often think of trauma in the context of our families of origin, of different things. But I thought it was so interesting that sometimes these sibling relationships, even siblings we love, can evoke feelings of shame and trauma inside of us. You talk about being the quote unquote bad twin. And how it was almost sort of sanctioned, that narrative about you. There's a moment you describe where some family members, I think it was your aunts, kind of even verbally are like, yeah, you're the bad twin, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's one of those things that's so relatable. I know so many of my listeners are like, yeah, I was the scapegoat. I was the bad one. And that creates this narrative in our mind. Talk to me a little bit about how that affected you and how that kind of damaged some of your own internal self-concept.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I talk to my clients about the ways that we find ourselves kind of aligning with things that people say, my clients may say something like, "Oh, I'm not allowed to do that," or "I can't do that." And I'll say, "Whose voice is that?" And they'll be like, "What do you mean?" And I'm like, "If you weren't saying that to yourself, who's the first person that comes to mind who would say that to you?" And I think that we forget that we absorb the voices around us. It's kind of like that song that you magically, I found out at like 25 that I know all the words to Shania Twain's song. Like, I'm like, oh, I guess I have heard this so many times that, my brain just, I didn't even know, I wasn't sitting down to learn the words. I just absorbed it because my brain was hearing it and my brain kept it. And that's kind of how it was for me being labeled the bad twin, was I had absorbed that. And I think that also when you have two people who have similarities in every way, people love dichotomy. People love a hero and a villain. People love yin and yang, good and bad. They love that differentiation. And I was the loud, excited, athlete, theater kid. I was like that. My sister was a little more quiet and reserved and artistic. And I started to live, and I say this, I think I say this in the book, that like we live in the stories we tell ourselves, but the stories we tell ourselves are often stories that were told to us first. And so I was told the story that I was a bad kid, and then I started regurgitating to myself that I was a bad kid, and then I started living out what I thought a bad kid would be.
Oh, it's so good. It's so true. Even listening to you, I have an older sister and we weren't twins, but there was a narrative around, she was the writer. And I remember still to this day, I've now published several books and it's still like, I'm not a writer. This isn't who I am, because the narrative in our family is she was more literary,
Yeah.
And I love what you're saying. Whose voice is that? Whose voice is that? Because sometimes we don't even know, we've just subconsciously absorbed and believed the story. And it's just feels so true.
Absolutely. One of the examples I give to my clients is if I say twinkle, twinkle little, and I just stop there, I said, like, what happens? And they're like, my brain says star. And I'm like, yeah, your brain filled in the blank before you had time to even think about the fact that there was a blank, right? And if I asked you when's the first time someone taught you that song, you probably couldn't remember.
Yeah. Powerful.
That's how those narratives work.
Yeah. It's just, I'm the bad twin. It's almost subconsciously, you could just fill in that blank. And it's hard to take that out and examine it for the truth of it without first becoming conscious that you even have that belief hidden in there.
Yep.
So you become a therapist. What was that leg of the journey like? How did you decide, I want to not only heal, but I want to study this so that I can help others?
Do you want the honest answer?
Yes.
I feel like I found out I wanted to help people after I got into grad school. Like, I knew that I wanted to help people, but I was kind of in that space where I was like, maybe I'll be a campus minister. Maybe I was just like, I want to help people. I didn't know exactly how. So I was like, God, I'm going to apply to grad school. And I only applied to one school, Gordon Conwell. I was like, if I get in, it's a sign. So I got in and I was like, oh, okay. And, even in school, I loved my program in many ways, but, I really struggled finding a therapist who understood my African context, who understood my Black context, who understood my Christian context. So it felt like I had to choose. I had to choose either like a Christian therapist or a Black therapist. Couldn't find any African therapists, it was just like, I felt like I couldn't find someone who I didn't have to spend time educating. And so I felt like, you know what? I'll be one more person in this space that people can come to and know that there is someone who understands the nuances and the complexities of what it means to be all these things, including a twin, right? What it means to be all these things. And when I got into the field, I knew that I wanted to learn diligently, but I also knew that I didn't want to lose who I was as a person. And I think the book really demonstrates that. I loved therapy, and sometimes I felt like I had to pull the personality out of my therapist. Like, are you a human? Are you connecting to me? Do you see my pain? Does this hurt you too? And I knew I wanted to be that therapist. I wanted to be a therapist who obviously honored all the ethical guidelines and all the legalities and stuff, but I wanted to be a human being. And I knew that that was something, even when I look at like my African background, I look at my Christian background, like stories are core to trust building and core to community healing. And so I knew that in the way that I did my work, I would put part of my story as a tool and maybe not in the clinical settings all the time, sometimes to just like, reflect off of clients' experiences. But this book was a really great way for me to be able to do that in a way that honored my boundaries as a therapist, but also helped serve in a way that aligns with my personal values.
I love what you're saying. I'm a human as a therapist. My whole self is in this. And the book reflects that. There's so many different ways you reflect in the book, those different elements of your story as a Christian, as a Black woman. You talk about in the book how you specifically for your client case studies, as we know when we write up client case studies, composites are composites, right? We always are very careful. But I think that one of the things you said is I'm going to use African names for my clients just as a way to honor that part of my heritage. I loved that. There was just so many ways. It's all those threads. We bring all of that. I love that you're doing that. I love that you're creating that space for other people. That's so beautiful. Every single one of us is so unique. So shouldn't our healthcare be tailored to your unique needs? Whenever I visited a traditional medicine doctor, I know they're trying their best, but so often I feel rushed or like I'm not really getting the customized care that I need. And that's why I'm so excited to introduce you to today's sponsor, Wild Health. Wild Health uses genetics, biometrics, and lifestyle data to help you determine what your unique body needs as far as nutrition, exercise, sleep, supplements, and more, so you can function at your best now and in the long run. For example, Wild Health can determine if you have elevated levels that can contribute to a wide range of current or potential issues, from brain fog or drowsiness during a busy workday to microbiome and gut health issues to indicators for diabetes or pre-diabetes. Once identified, 89% of Wild Health patients showed improvement with these challenges. Plus, Wild Health is easy to use. It's fully virtual via telemedicine and available everywhere in the U.S. Wild Health is generously extending Best of You listeners 20% off the cost of membership with code BESTOFYOU. Head over to wildhealth.com/bestofyou and use code BESTOFYOU at checkout. Make this commitment to yourself and start taking control of your health today at wildhealth.com/bestofyou. Our dogs love Sundays. I'm not kidding. One of our dogs was the slowest eater on earth for the first several years of her life. It was painful how long it would take her to eat. The minute we introduced her to Sundays, she just laps it up. She loves it. Sundays is healthy dog food that's easy to store and serve. Most foods are one or the other, but Sundays is both. It's fresh dog food made from a short list of human-grade ingredients that contains 90% meat, 10% superfoods, and 0% synthetic nutrients. But unlike other fresh dog food, it doesn't require refrigeration or preparation. It's air-dried, so you simply pour and serve. It's so easy. Get 40% off your first order of Sundays. Go to sundaysfordogs.com/bestofyou or use code BESTOFYOU at checkout. I'm going to admit it, I love getting fresh groceries delivered right to my door. It's just so convenient. And Thrive Market is the #1 destination for parents looking for healthy, stress-free grocery shopping for the whole family, especially as we start to enter into the busy back-to-school season. From nut-free snacks to high-protein bars and snack packs for lunchboxes, Thrive Market has you and your kids covered as you get back into the school year and your routine. You'll find all kinds of healthy snack brands like Simple Mills, Annie's, and our favorite, That's It fruit bars. And I love that Thrive Market only allows trusted, top-quality ingredients while restricting thousands of harmful ingredients like artificial flavors, high fructose corn syrup, and more. Best of all, when you join Thrive Market, you are also helping a family in need with their 1-for-1 membership matching program. Save time and money and shop Thrive Market today. Go to thrivemarket.com/bestofyou for 30% off your first order plus a free $60 gift. That's THRIVE market.com/bestofyou. thrivemarket.com/bestofyou. I think one of the things you're saying is so important for the listener to hear, that sometimes we have to wrestle for that person who really gets us. It's not sometimes so easy as just find a therapist. Sometimes we have to work for it. And internally we might be like, oh, this isn't really a fit, or they're not really getting me. There's a wrestling a little bit. sometimes it can take a minute to find that person where we're really like, oh, this person just gets me. Along your journey, whether in graduate school or after, have you found some folks who have stood out in that landscape? And what was that like for you?
Yes. Well, you know what's really interesting? I think that I found those people, but I found those people only after I accepted that maybe the most important thing is that my needs get met. Because they didn't always fit the bill. I was like, I want a therapist that's just like me. And like, I was like, sent therapists that were completely opposite of me in thought, in religious belief, in race, in all of it. And those were the people that like, I think that was so powerful for me, is like, I had to get desperate enough to say, is this person qualified to help me process trauma? Yes, I'm going. And after going, realizing it was kind of like rewriting of the internal narrative. Maybe I don't need all the things that I keep telling myself I need. Maybe all these rules I've set on myself to make healing possible and accessible are really just barriers to me getting well. And when I started accepting that someone does not have to meet all of my specific criteria, I started finding the right people at the right time in my journey, right? I found the right therapist for when I really needed to process some trauma. I found the right therapist when I really wanted to navigate the nuances of marriage. I found the right therapist when I really wanted to process what it meant to become a mom. The right therapist as I built my business. And it was really cool. And sometimes even in those different stages, those therapists evolved with me, which was really cool. Like therapists get training and they try different modalities. And it was cool to be on the receiving end of that, even as a therapist. But I loved the fact that my therapists were not always the people that I thought I needed. And yet they shifted the trajectory of my life in ways that I can't express because I was willing to just be open. And so if anyone's listening, I would say put the first thing first. If you're really struggling with anxiety, find someone who specializes in anxiety and let yourself be surprised. And if you're surprised in a way that you don't like, it's okay to change your mind.
I love that. It is first and foremost a relationship. And then first and foremost, it is about the specific thing that you're struggling with. There is an expert, there's someone there who's trained. People always ask me if I think you should only see a Christian therapist. And all I can say is in my experience, it really depends on the topic. But one of the therapists who's been the most helpful to me does not share my faith background at all. And what's been so helpful is she can actually see the ways in which I can sort of defer that subtle spiritual bypassing, kind of using, oh God, wait a minute, let's examine that a little bit. And while still being very respectful of my beliefs, it's always been really interesting to me, to your point.
Yeah. I tell my clients who ask similarly, like, we're only looking for a Christian therapist. And I'm like, now. I'm sure it'd be great to have a Christian therapist. But also, let's say you're looking for a therapist and they're not Christian. How do you know if they're the good fit for you? I said, the most powerful marker of someone who could truly help you is their humility and their curiosity. Are they willing to believe you that you're the expert of your experience? Because I'll say sometimes that could be hard for Christian therapists. It's like sometimes we're like, I know the spiritual answer to this. In Mark chapter 8, and having to remind people that I think I mentioned this in the book, my greatest breakthrough in my walk with Jesus at that time was with a therapist who did not believe in Jesus at all. She was like, if Jesus is so kind, why is he always mad at you? Like, if he's so full of grace, how come every time you talk about him, he doesn't sound very graceful? We're doing EMDR, and she was like, do you want to invite Jesus into the room? And I was like, yeah. And it was a moment that shifted literally my entire life and my entire way of doing therapy. And she was not a believer.
What a powerful story. I love that. She held up the mirror to you about your own beliefs and challenged some underlying assumption there that wasn't really about Jesus, but was about, again, to your point, these messages that you had picked up. Talk to us a little bit about your understanding of trauma, how you talk about it with clients, how you understand it, how you look for it as a clinician.
Yeah. We love to talk about trauma nowadays, especially on social media, all the things. But I kind of come from a more subtle point of view because I think, as you know, there's a lot of people who experience trauma who like do not recognize it as trauma because it's not a car crash, it's not an assault, it's not a tornado, you know? And so I tell my clients, you know, like trauma is any past event that affects how you show up in the present and how you perceive the future. And I differentiate the difference between something that hurts and something that's traumatic is something that hurts does not shape the way you live your life from that moment forward, right? It does not create a sense of anxiety, worry, fear, self-loathing from that moment forward. And when we experience trauma, it really is us experiencing a level of distress that far surpasses the skills we have to manage that distress. So your body is reliving, and I try to say that intentionally, not just remembering, it's reliving those experiences from the past in the present, which is why you have distress in the present. And so I try to help people understand that trauma are these wounds. In Greek, the word trauma translates to the word wound. They are wounds that need to be healed and tended to. And some wounds heal up perfectly and you can be good as new and run as fast as you did before. And some wounds will leave scars and some wounds will leave a little bit of a limp. But there's always a healing that can come to fruition for you. And that's something that I think is really important to say. It sounds so simple, but I think that as much as we have educated people about trauma online and in our work, we have not educated them that you can heal from trauma. There is a world in which you cannot meet any of the criteria for PTSD. And I remember one of my clients' faces, we've been working together for 3 years, and I was like, hey, let's go through your treatment plan. And I said, how do you feel? All the things. She's like, I feel like a new person. I'm going through all the things. And I'm like, you no longer meet the criteria for PTSD. And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, you no longer meet the criteria for PTSD. So this diagnosis is no longer current. And she was like, I thought when you're diagnosed with something, you just have it forever. And I said, there's some things that are on the more chronic side, but no, like there is a resolution to trauma. There can be a resolution to trauma. And so anytime I talk about trauma, I promise myself that that is something I will say out loud. Trauma can be resolved. The same way it can be inflicted is the same way that it can be resolved.
Yeah, that's really good. I really appreciate what you're saying. We had a psychiatrist on the podcast last week talking about how, we were kind of going back and forth on the value of diagnoses. And you're saying so well. One of the things he said was it should help us mark the path toward healing, as opposed to put us stuck in this is my identity. Not that, like, to your point, not that sometimes we have a diagnosis that will be with us for a long time, but it should help us. And I love what you're saying there, especially about that PTSD, that we want to name it. It's so important to name it for what it is so that we can get on the right healing path therapeutically, but not so that we sort of have to just live in it for the rest of our lives. It's so hopeful.
Yeah. And it helps us see exactly what is being healed. Like, I no longer have flashbacks and I had flashbacks. I no longer have nightmares and I had nightmares. And like, that has been healing for my clients. They're like, wow, like, because when you're along the journey, sometimes you miss the ways you're being healed. Because as soon as one thing is like restored, your mind is like, now we need to focus on this. That gets restored. And sometimes it's so good for you to look back and be like, wow, these are all the things in the last 3 years of therapy that I once carried that I no longer carry as a daily experience.
I love the intentionality with which to pause and look at that. Because I think if we don't do that, the thing is, life is challenging. New challenges will come up. We'll have new relational challenges, right? Our kids will go through stuff. So we're always going to have stuff. But to pause and go, in this particular part of our healing, look at how far we've come. I think that's really, really beautiful. What are some of your, both in your personal experience and in your work as a clinician, what are some of your favorite practices or modalities or your favorite ways to kind of get into the deep tissue work of trauma work?
I love psychodrama and sociometry.
You talk about that in the book. I love it. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. It is. Now, because the world is virtual, there's a lot of adaptation and we don't get to go as deep. But I tell my clients, imagination sometimes gives us access to like a heavenly reality that already exists, but we just haven't had the courage to access yet. Like, pretend you're not yourself. Pretend you're somebody else. Pretend you could go back. And it is such a powerful reminder that the wound, the trauma is in the present, because the moment I set up the room and we pretend like you're back there, you're actually back there. Your body feels that way. The tears are there, the feeling, the shaking, and we can go back with the resources of the present to the wounds and apply them to the wounds of the past. We can take the wisdom of the present and apply it to the wound of the past. And I love that about sociometry and psychodrama, and gently, skillfully replaying some moments that are deeply wounding and giving people a chance to do it again. I had a psychodrama moment with a client who got to go back and say goodbye to her father who passed away, and she missed that moment. And she went back and said goodbye, and it did something, right? Movement, action. Healing is holistic. It's not just something we think ourselves into. It's something we move ourselves into. And so I can talk about this forever, but that is my favorite, is seeing people access the reality that play and imagination are core to healing.
It's one of the things I love about IFS, right, where you can go back to that. But I love how in the book you actually talk about your own experience I think it was a group therapeutic setting.
Yep, at On-Site.
Yeah. I mean, even when you just said that right now, I could feel in my body just some things I'm working through with some family of origin stuff, even at my age, right, with older aging parents. And just when you said it, I could feel in my body, oh, wow, that's what's going on. I'm back in that, 10-year-old self where it's like, oh, I can't say this. I can't do this. I can almost feel the tears come to my eyes, right? Because current situations and different life transitions bring up those old memories, those old emotions, and to have that opportunity, like you're saying, to just go back with someone else witnessing you. It's so powerful. It's so powerful.
Yes. And even thinking about the reality that community is such a powerful context to heal in, but that doesn't mean we always have to heal in community in the way that we've always been taught. So for that client, they were really struggling with the reality of, well, I can't break down because this other person in the room needs someone to be strong, right? All the strings attached to my reaction. But when you go back in psychodrama, there are no strings attached to your reaction. You get to become more aware of the strings attached to your reactions and to your emotions and to your expression. But when it's time for you to really release, there are no strings attached. These are strangers. We'll never see each other again unless you want to keep in touch, and this gets to be just about you in the context of your unresolved pain without you having to carry the burden of how other people will think and react.
Man, I love what you're saying about community. And I want people to read that part of your book where you talk about your own experience out on site. I think it's with anger, right? It's powerful. And it's a different layer. It's not just talking, head. It's you were in it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my favorite thing. I had a retreat this year in February here in the Charlotte area, and I do like a psychodrama trauma intensive. And it was in a beautiful lakefront house, and we were screaming and crying, and it was great. I loved it. It was amazing. It was so fun. And I think that sometimes people think, but I can't. And it's like, no, you can, but you're right about the fact that it's not safe to do it in that context.
Yeah. Yeah, you couldn't do it then. Here's a different context in which, what is it like to experience that with people in the room who can hold the bigness of what you're feeling and of who you are in this moment, all those fears. Americans spend an average of 90% of their time indoors and take about 20,000 breaths a day. The indoor air that we breathe is 2 to 5 times more polluted than outdoor air, and in some cases up to 100 times more polluted, according to the EPA. So what's the solution? Introducing an air purifier that captured the attention of established media outlets such as CNN, Money, ABC, and more. Air Doctor filters out 99% of dangerous contaminants so your lungs don't have to. This includes pollutants such as allergens, pollen, pet dander, dust mites, mold spores, and even bacteria and viruses that make you sick. Air Doctor comes with a 30-day, breathe-easy, money-back guarantee. So if you don't love it, just send it back for a refund, minus shipping. Head to airdoctorpro.com and use promo code BESTOFYOU. You'll receive up to $300 off air purifiers. Exclusive to podcast customers, you will also receive a free 3-year warranty on any unit, which is an additional $84 value. lock this special offer by going to airdoctorpro.com. That's AIRDOCTORPRO.com and use promo code BESTOFYOU. I try so hard to create a sanctuary within my home for me and for my family, where every evening it's a refuge from the demands of the outside world and all the noise and chaos of our lives. And that's one of the things I love about Cozy Earth. They understand how to help you transform your space into an elevated haven that brings comfort and tranquility in the midst of our hectic lives. I love Cozy Earth's bamboo sheet sets. They're made from 100% premium viscose from bamboo, and they are so soft, and they only get softer with every wash, and they even come with a 10-year warranty. That's how durable they are. Go to cozyearth.com/bestofyou and use code bestofyou for an exclusive 40% discount. And if you get a post-purchase survey, say that you heard about Cozy Earth from the Best of You podcast, and they'll send you a free set of socks. Upgrade your nights and transform your days with Cozy Earth. Go to cozyearth.com/bestofyou and use code bestofyou for an exclusive 40% discount. So you've written this book, you're speaking, you're seeing clients, you've got 2 kids. You said 6 and 3, 2 babies. There's so much going on in your life. What practices are you personally engaged with that help you? Because as you and I both know, the process of healing is a journey. It's a practice. So what practices help you stay grounded, stay inwardly attuned to yourself, to your own needs in the midst of all that? What practices matter to you?
I try to make sure that every morning I read my Bible and pray and do some breathing exercises. The Dwell app has been incredible for me. They do guided meditations, Lectio Divina, breath prayer. And I facilitate that with lots of clients. But as you know, you can't facilitate it for yourself as easily. Sometimes it's just nice to be led. So I try to do that in the mornings, get outside, drink water, take my vitamins. And also I go to therapy. I love my therapist. She is in many ways a lifeline for me. And have my therapist and I lead into community. I think there's something really cool about having community in which no one carries everything. I think that there was a time, especially as a church girl, you can be like, oh, I have my small group and they are like my community and they hold everything for me, or my husband holds everything for me, or my best friend holds everything for me. But there's just been just a powerful shift for me where I've been able to say, nobody has to hold everything for me. And so it's been cool to be able to say, I have to hold some stuff for myself. I have an incredible husband who holds things for me. I have incredible friends who show up for me and I love showing up for. I have a therapist. I have a church community. So I have been really leaning into this season being connected, because I think I'm still dealing with some of the effects of COVID-19 from 2020. I know it feels long ago, but I was pregnant the entirety of COVID. Found out I was pregnant with my son 2 days before lockdown started. Was so excited. I was like, yes, a 2-week break. This is going to be so great. Remember when we were excited? Lord, we didn't know. We did not know. And I was so excited to have that break turned into just a season of anxiety, of fear, of, all the things. And so I think that reinvesting back into community, giving of myself to community and letting myself receive community has been, I think, the biggest ritual for me.
I love what you're saying about not putting it all in one place, kind of diversifying in a way, making sure there's different pockets. I also think you're making a really good point. I've noticed this as well, to not underestimate the ripple effects of that shutdown, especially on our rhythms of community. There's been so many more changes, even just the virtual space and all the things, not to underestimate how we continue to work through that. And then I'm curious, we have this category when we think about therapy. I don't know if the listener is aware of this, but we tend to think of, are you in maintenance, which means you're essentially doing well, but you kind of continue to see a therapist just to sort of stay tuned up, versus when you're going because you need a very specific targeted intervention. Do you kind of keep up a maintenance approach to therapy for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I realize that by the time I'm realizing something is wrong, something's been wrong for a while. So just the way that my brain naturally works is like, I think that you definitely know what it means to have book deadlines and see clients, and you're showing up on social media, you're engaging in your personal community, you're trying to engage your online community, you're serving, you have a family, like you have your own world outside of this digital world. And I found that, I had to accept probably 2 years ago, which is like when thick of writing my book, if I am like, something's not right, I think I need to talk to someone, it's probably been not right for a little bit.
I love that self-awareness. Just this is a proactive thing I can do, is just keep having someone check in on me. I agree with you. It's just, I've got to have someone asking me because you're right. By the time you're asking for help, it's an emergency.
And things change so quickly. I mean, truly, things change so quickly. We've seen this week in current events. And I've realized it is much better to go to therapy and have nothing to talk about than to have to reestablish a therapeutic relationship and see if a therapist has an opening. As a therapist, like, my books are full. So some of my clients that discharged and decided not to do maintenance, sometimes when they want to come back, I would love to. There's just no time on my schedule to do so. And so part of it is also protective, the knowing that I always have access to support, whether I feel like I need it in a dire way or not.
Oh, I think that's wise. I think there's so much wisdom in that. And even what you're saying is, I would say to the listener, if you find someone, especially that you connect with, that really can help you, that's a relationship. And I understand there's a cost, there's expense. That's hard.
I'm just co-signing you. I'm like, don't let them go.
Yeah. And you can talk to them about that. Say, like, I want to keep this relationship. Could we go to monthly? Could we go, especially if there's a financial burden to that, talk that through with a therapist. Ask about that.
Don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. I had a client who was like, can I do 15-minute check-ins? And can we prorate it to 15 minutes? And I was like, sure. So now we do 15-minute check-ins. And when we started realizing that the 15 minutes was getting a little tight, she was like, can we do 30 minutes? And I don't typically advertise 30 minutes, but we've built such a long-standing therapeutic alliance. I've been seeing this person for years. And that's also the benefit of working in private practice, is like I'm able to adjust things based on people's needs. And then it was, hey, can we go back to a full session? Yeah, we can go back to a full session. So don't be afraid to ask. Once you've built a relationship with your therapist, don't be afraid to ask if they're willing to accommodate the way they provide services to meet your needs, because sometimes the answer is yes.
That's right. I love that. And advocate for yourself. I love what you're saying, because I've had that happen where I'll be like, I just need a little tune-up. And then suddenly I'm like, I think we'll be doing some major deep work over the next couple of months. We are all in that boat. All right. So I have a few questions I like to ask all my guests. But before we go there, I just want to ask you, where can people find your work?
Absolutely. You can go to KobeCampbell.com. That's KobeCampbell.com. All my social media handles are Kobe Campbell _. So YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all of the spaces. Unfortunately, there are a lot of fake pages, and I'm not verified on all platforms. So just remember, it has an _ at the end of it. And then you can get my book, Why Am I Like This? Really anywhere where books are sold: Target, Walmart, Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble. You can grab it in any of those spaces.
Such a great resource. I strongly encourage everyone to check it out. It's just so good that you go really deep into what some of these interventions look like, how you apply them, the ACEs. You talk a lot about the history of trauma, how it's been understood. It's just a really great resource. All right, Kobe, what would you say to that younger 20-ish, I'm not sure exactly how old she was, girl who you opened up the book with? What would you say to her now, if you could spend a little time with her?
I would say to her, you have no clue what that seed of courage created in your life, that life gets so much better. And even though this moment feels so big, there are going to be some days where you forgot it even happened.
I love that.
And go girl. Add that in there too.
I love that. I'm so happy for her that she has you.
Thank you. Me too.
What is bringing out the best of you right now?
Talking to my friends. I think that friendship is one of the relationships that I think we forget also needs maintenance. And so it's been so cool to, as just my career has evolved, to let my friends into just different nuances of the career. Because I realized that like I published the book and none of my friends knew what publishing, like what it entailed. And so when I was stressed out about deadlines and editing and stuff, they like didn't know how to come for me because they just didn't know. And so it's been cool like saying like, this is what I do and this is how I do it. And this is why I stress me out sometimes. And this is why I love it. And that has been great. And moving my body and deciding that there does not have to be a limit or a goal. 5 minutes, dancing, walking, whatever it is, it's about moving my body, reminding myself that I'm alive, reminding my bodies and my limbs that they're still needed, and not about achieving any goals.
I love that. I love what you're saying about kind of updating your friends and bringing them into your professional life. I think it can be easy to create a dichotomy there. Sometimes our friends don't know something over here has changed. It can happen with vocation. It can happen when you become a mom. It can happen different seasons of life where our friends don't necessarily know. And so to kind of take the time to go, hey, I want to let you into this. I love that. That's beautiful. Last question. What needs or desires are you working to protect?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think I'm protecting my need to rest. And I think I'm rediscovering what rest is. I recently went on an 8-day vacation and I brought my laptop and I realized that my idea was rest was being able to work without interruption. And like every time I tried to open my laptop, I just couldn't do it. And the entire 8 days, I think it was probably the first 8 days of my life since like summer break in high school that I did not work a single moment. And I was like, whoa, like it was mind blowing. I was just like, oh, like this is rest. And then protecting that. Like I'm discovering that rest is truly delighting in the present without a constant need to try and work for what I think I need to be reaching for in the future. And I'm trying to protect that. Even like a lot of self-talk of it's okay if this doesn't happen, this being book 2 doesn't happen in this time, if it means that you are a better person when it comes out. You know, if you're healthier, if you're more well.
That's good. I love that. I honor that in you, the both and, the part of you that strives and the part of you that's like, okay, what's this going to look like? I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your time and presence and talents and words of wisdom with all of us.
Thank you for having me. It's great talking with you.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of The Best of You. It would mean so much if you take a moment to subscribe. You can go to Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts and click the plus or follow button. That will ensure you don't miss an episode and it helps get the word out to others. While you're there, I'd love it if you leave your 5-star review. I look forward to seeing you back here next Thursday. And remember, as you become the best of who you are, you honor God, you heal others, and you stay true to your God-given self.